Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy LB, back at y'all again for another album review. You know what I'm saying? Coming back at you guys as soon as possible. You know what I'm saying? Just getting in as much as I can. But so anyway, not to hold y'all up anymore. An album I want to talk about today is an album by one of my favorite rappers, which is Redman. And I want to talk about his album. There's a Darkside. Hope y'all can see that. You know what I'm saying? This is Redman's second album, released in 1994 on Def Jam. Hope you got check out the Fishbone shirt. But anyway, yeah, this was Redman's second album, released 2 years after his first one, What the Album. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys know who Redman is, but for those of you who may not be too familiar with him, you know, he's a East Coast rapper from Newark, New Jersey. He was discovered by EPMD, and he came on the scene in 1990 when he was featured on their third album, Business as Usual, released on Def Jam. He made a couple appearances on that album, on the song Brothers on My Jock, and on the single Hardcore. And you know, of course, then in 2 years later, in 1992, he dropped his debut album, What the Album, which was a critical and commercial success. You know what I'm saying? It spawned quite a few hits, man. Well, not more than a few. You know, songs like Blow Your Mind, Time for Some Action, Tonight's the Night, and also probably another track that wasn't a single, but probably that was well known from the album, is the song produced by Pete Rock called How to Roll a Blunt. You know what I'm saying? Where pretty much, you know, Redman goes through this whole, you know, instruction manual about how to roll a blunt. But anyway, he followed this album up and with There's a Darkside. And this album, it pretty much lives up to its name, because it's a far more darker album and more hardcore than What the Album was. What the Album was more in the vein of like EPMD. And, you know, because, you know, of course, Eric Sermon was the main producer on that album. But There's a Darkside. What's significant about this is it takes a more darker approach. Redman's whole delivery, his whole attitude on this album is more erratic, kind of out there, kind of psychotic like. And another thing that's really more significant is that Redman did most of the production. He did most of the production on the album. This album right here, it had two singles, Rockefeller and Can't Wait. Can't Wait, man, that's one of Can't Wait is one of Redman's best songs. It has one of my favorite lines. Dang, I used to have that line down pat. It was like switching up speeds like Bruce Lee in a movie Riding the Fuji. I'm not sure if I spit that right. I used to have that line spit down, but he spit one of the illest punchlines in that song, and that's one of Redman's most. I think that's one of his most best songs. But unfortunately, man, this album, like a lot of the albums I reviewed, it's overlooked. You know what I'm saying? A lot of fans are divided with this album. A lot of fans say There's a Darkside is his best album. Then, you know, a lot of people say Muddy Waters. I'm more of a There's a Darkside fan. I like that album. Don't get me wrong, Muddy Waters, you know, is definitely a great album. But I just like There's a Darkside better, because, you know, Redman it's like, to me, that's the album where Redman really started coming into his own. As far as like, you know, kicking like, you know, hardcore rhymes and being very witty. To me, that's the album where this is the album where Redman really started coming into his own. And it's unfortunate, man, because Redman doesn't even like the album. It's his least favorite album in his discography, man. And I mean, I kind of hate that, man, because he doesn't. Another reviewer, he said that Redman, he doesn't even perform any songs from that album live. And that's unfortunate, man, because it's a great album. I mean, it's too bad that he really doesn't know how there are a lot of fans out there that really enjoy this album. But you know, the album starts off with an intro from Dr. Travis. Dr. Travis was introduced on the first album, and he continued. I think he continued on until maybe Doc's the Name 2000, or he might. I think he might have been on the Malpractice album. But you know, if you've heard the first album, you're familiar with Dr. Travis. Do you know Bob Your Head to this, which is an introduction track with Red just going in, you know, just going bananas lyrically. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And what else? 1,000,001 Buddha Spots, man. That's another favorite track of mine from this album. That album sounds like something that you would hear from like the Boot Camp clip. Like, I know there's a lot of people that compare that track to like a Smith and Wesson song, because honestly, that track does sound like a Beatminer's track. It does sound like something that you would hear Smith and Wesson, like Tech and Steel, spitting over, because it sounds like an outtake from their The Shining album, released in '95. The beat is very rugged and dirty, man. Cosmic Slop Shot. That's another highlight on the album, man. It features the Def Squad, which is none other than Redman himself, Keith Murray, and Eric Sermon. Keith Murray is easily the standout on this track. I mean, his verse, as soon as he begins, he just shreds it to pieces. You know, Rockefeller, which is one of the singles. But before the song Rockefeller, there's an introduction track called Rockefeller R.I.P. Apparently Rockefeller was like a friend of Redman's that rapped. He died somewhere along in between this album and the first album, but you know, dude was a great spitter though. Green Island, track number 11. That's another dope track. That's another track I already know. That's another one of my favorite tracks that I listen to all the time, man. Like, don't really know what the song is about, unless it's, you know, all I know is that Redman just goes in lyrically. I think that song's actually produced by Eric Sermon, as well as Cosmic Slop Shot. Basically, which is another short track, 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Another track produced by Redman, like majority of the songs on here. That's another great track. Very eerie. It has keyboards. These very eerie keyboards in it, man. It makes the song kind of spooky, but it's dope. Can't Wait, which is one of the singles, man. I already told you. I think Eric Sermon produced that track, and I like how he flipped the whole Mary Jane Girls sample. I just like how he did that sample and added it to that song. And matter of fact, on the video, which you can find on YouTube, Redman had the Mary Jane Girls in the video. You know what I'm saying? But When I Come Around, that song, that's not really one of my favorite tracks. That song, to me, that song seems a bit out of place because it's more of an up-tempo song. That song sounds like it would have been more fitting on the first album, because most of the beats on this album are kind of slow and dark and really bass heavy. That song it's more up-tempo. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the album. What It Looked Like, pretty dope song. But honestly, man, after track 13, man, the album kind of gets, it's alright. But I say, from not counting like the introduction, Dr. Travis, I say tracks 2 to 13 is pretty dope, man. I like We Run NY. That's a pretty tight track. Features Hurricane G. Oh yeah, and the Superman Lover song is pretty dope. But I mean, and there's a remix of Tonight's the Night, which was a single from the first album. But I still think this is a pretty great album. And like I said, you know, it's one of Redman's least favorite albums. Also, an interesting thing about this album is, I read an interview that Redman did on Hip Hop DX, and he said that he doesn't even really remember recording this album because he was doing so many drugs at the time. Like, he was pretty much just baked he was high the whole while he was recording this album, which, I mean, no surprise. I mean, we talking about Redman here, but he says he was doing so many drugs during the recording of this album that he barely remembers even doing it. And he also says that he hasn't listened to the album since he like dropped it or finished recording the album. He hasn't listened to the album since then. And he said it kind of like shocks him it surprises him when he have fans come up to him saying that, yo, there's a Darkside. That's my favorite Redman album. Yo, I love that album. But like I said, it's really not his favorite album. He himself is a Muddy Waters fan, because Muddy Waters is the album that really like blew him up. But all in all, man, this is a pretty great album. You know what I'm saying? I enjoyed listening to it. I will admit that it's not one of those albums that's really gonna grasp you. You know what I'm saying? At the beginning, when you first listen to it, it's definitely one of those albums where you have to listen to it a few times before you start recognizing the goodness of it, the greatness of it, at least. But it's still a great album. I wouldn't sleep on it. So it's still in print. So if you happen to come across this, I actually found this at Best Buy. That's probably shocking to hear, because Best Buy has really fallen off as far as like, the music. They really don't have nothing good. They have when it comes to new releases, yeah, but they've really fallen off when it comes to like stuff like this. I found it in the cheaper CDs. Like, I think this was like $4.99 or $5.99. I'm not sure. Might have been $4.99, but I had never heard the album before, and I seen it for $4.99. I was like, hey, it's Redman. He's one of my favorite rappers, so why not? And I grabbed it. But this album is still in print, so if you definitely if you come across it, don't hesitate to buy it. But anyway, this has been another review from LB, and as always, love, peace, and happiness, and be blessed. Peace.